Hello, and welcome to Homegrown KC, a podcast dedicated to exploring Kansas City's fascinating history and sharing stories from its rich past. I'm your host, Laura. Join me today as we explore a piece of Kansas City's history. Before I dive into today's announcements, I have a disclaimer. This show is my own and no reflection of the values and mission of the Black Archives of Mid-America. Happy April, everyone. I hope you are doing well this month. This month's Patreon episode was rescheduled due to a last-minute emergency. Apologies to my supporters. That's now 2 months in a row that we've had to reschedule a Patreon recording. I hope to have both of them rescheduled soon. And I know that I forgot to send out my newsletter in April and March, so for those of you who subscribe to the newsletter, I'm also sorry. But I literally just wrote it before I sat down to record this, and I have the site set up to auto-send on May 1st, so you will be getting a newsletter finally after like 3 months. If you have not already subscribed, now is a great time to do so. Visit my website, homegrownkc.wordpress.com, to get signed up. I had my first official Homegrown KC adventure of 2024 on April 13th. My grandmother and I went to the American Royal Center and saw all of this year's Parade of Hearts. They all look so good. I have already posted the first 10 on my social medias, and I will slowly be sharing the rest of the images on my socials throughout the summer. And I was so excited to see first thing Monday morning on the 15th that Hidden Treasures by Catherine Moores was placed right next to the flagpole at the archive. That is one of the hearts this year. That was very fun. You will also see some images from the Garrison School in Liberty on my socials soon. I had the chance to visit the Garrison School recently while attending a museum educators meeting for the Black Archives. I did not realize how much Black history was recognized in Liberty, so I'm thinking that one day this summer will just be a day trip to Liberty where I see all of it, and then of course a Minnesota about everything. That would be fun. Next month, I am going on a new urban hike, finally. I didn't do one at all last year, but new urban hike in Merriam, KC, try that again, Kansas. This hike is literally brand new. It's starting like the first weekend of May, and I'm gonna go see it, go on it at the end of May. So I am very excited to do that. Again, of course, there will be another mini-sode afterwards. If you're interested in what an urban hike is, there are 2 mini-sodes already recorded about my previous urban hikes. You can find them wherever you listen to the podcast. Check them out, and then go on an urban hike. Alright, here we go. This is Series 8, 2024, We the People, Topic 2, Harry S. Truman, Part 3. Last month, I did tell you that you would get this episode earlier in the month, and you almost did. Of course, that's not what ended up happening, but you almost did. I finished the script a couple weeks ago, but then I was out of town for a few days for my brother's wedding. Congratulations to them again. I'm so happy for them. And so, of course, I had to prep for like a week before the trip, get the car taken care of, get the house cleaned. And then since I came home from the trip, I've been very busy with work. So it's not early, but it's not late either. We're still getting it out in April. Here we go. You're all ready? Recap. Truman is born in 1884. After high school, he bounces around from job to job, always coming back to the family farm. He joins the Army in 1917, fights in World War I, returns the summer of 1919, immediately marries Bess. He opens his own business, but it's not long before he befriends Tom Pendergast and gets into politics. So here we go. You ready for this? Prior to his senatorial seat, there was some support in 1928 for Truman to become the next governor of Missouri, but Tom supported Francis M. Wilson from Platte City instead. Mr. Wilson lost the election, which crushed other efforts to promote Truman to that seat as well. As senator, Truman continued to support Pendergast and his fellow machine brothers. For example, he made his brother Vivian, who was also a member of the machine, head of the Federal House Agency in Kansas City. The machine began to crumble in the late 1930s. Listen to Pendergast Saga Parts 4 and 5 to learn more about that specifically. Yet, despite his well-known connection to a now convicted felon, Truman managed to win his re-election in 1940. One of the greatest impacts Truman had during his time as senator was the creation of the Tuskegee Airmen. I think most of you have heard of them. Maybe you actually know who they are. Otherwise, you're probably just like, sounds familiar. I heard that in high school ages and ages ago. If not, maybe you know them as the Red Tails. There's a movie called Red Tails. These are the fighter pilots in World War II. So in the 1930s and 40s, we have the great institution of segregation, #sarcasm, and black folk are not really welcome in the military. During World War I, black men were not allowed to be pilots, and they almost were not allowed to be pilots in World War II either. Yet, we have Truman to thank for that, and I'll get to that in a second. Introducing Chauncey Spencer Sr. So, Chauncey was born in Lynchburg, Virginia on November 5th, 1906. His father's name was Edward, and his mother was famed Harlem Renaissance poetess. I love that, by the way, poetess. It's so pretty. Anne Spencer. So he loved airplanes and flying, but because he was black and living in the early 1900s America, it was really, really hard for him to learn how to fly. White folk were like, no, we don't want to teach you. And there were not very many black pilot flight schools in America. None at all in Virginia. The very best one in the nation happened to be in Chicago, so after high school, Chauncey moved to Chicago. He went to flight school and he became a pilot. In 1939, Chauncey and his buddy Dale Lawrence White rent this very old airplane. It's in somewhat poor condition, and they fly it across the country to Washington, D.C. to talk to Congress about allowing black men to join the Air Force as pilots through the new civilian pilot training program, which had been established the year before in 1938, specifically to teach white men to fly, but they're trying to convince them to let black folk, or to let black men learn to fly as well. Quite frankly, they almost did not survive this trip. They actually crashed right after taking off, or take that back, they didn't crash, but they had to land quickly right after taking off because there was like a fuel leak or something, and then they did almost crash later in the flight. When they get to DC, they meet up with a friend who worked at the Capitol, and they were on their way inside. This is obviously pre-January 6th, and I don't just mean that in terms of years, but also ease of access, with the goal of speaking to Illinois Senator Everett Dickerson. So they're with a different friend who's like a custodian or staff or something. He's going to take them to go see Congressman Dickerson. And they're going to talk to him about, hey, will you advocate for us on the Senate floor? Yet, while they're on their way in, Harry Truman walks by, and being a nice guy, he stops and says, hello, how are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? And they tell him, hey, we're pilots, and we want to join the Air Corps. So the story here that I was told is that Truman is surprised that they were not allowed to join the Air Force. Seems highly unlikely, as Truman was a very smart man, and I feel like he would have recognized segregation as preventing them from joining, but then again, we all have our blind spots and biases, and sometimes you need somebody on the outside to point that out to you. Well, Truman is like, alright, well, I'll tell you what, why don't I meet you at your hangar to see your airplane this afternoon? They're like, yeah, sure, and they go on their way. And again, the story I was told was that they're like, okay, this dude was nice, but he's not actually going to show, but he does. And after seeing their plane and talking to them a bit more, Truman is the one that ends up taking their case up on the Senate floor. So, in 1939, just a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, I'm not entirely sure how long afterwards, after this meeting, Congress does pass a bill that finally allows black men to become pilots, but They're not allowed to train with the white guys, because again, we still have segregation. In 1941, 2 years later, the War Department finally starts giving money to civilian pilot programs to train them in. Also in 1941, President Roosevelt signed an executive order that allowed discrimination on all federal military bases and operation of the first all-black Air Force unit. This is what becomes the Tuskegee Airmen, because they all trained at Tuskegee Institute. So when America joins the fighting in World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen end up being absolutely integral to U.S. Air Force success. In order to drop the bombs, the planes that have the bombs, they have to fly really low, right? But that puts them in range of ground artillery. And they were supposed to have smaller planes flying around them, protecting them, like shooting back at the artillery. But all the white pilots are like, we don't like this. We don't want to do this. We're getting killed. So the Air Force was losing something like 200 planes a day to opposing forces. Bomber planes, specifically, because their little protector buddies are not doing their job. Yet, once the Tuskegee Airmen took over the role of escorts, that stopped being an issue almost completely. After that, they lost only 27 planes for the rest of the war. And they had been losing 200 planes a day for, I think, a year, I think 2 years actually, but at least a year into the war before they switched to using the Tuskegee Airmen. So I learned all of this because I actually met Chauncey's son, Chauncey Spencer Jr., and he told me his father's story, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm so putting this in here. He has a mobile exhibit where he travels the country and teaches kids all about Black aviation history and specifically the Tuskegee Airmen, all inspired by his father. He spent a week at the Black Archives with this traveling exhibit. When was that? End of March, I think. So if you are interested in learning more about the Tuskegee Airmen, you can find a lot of information about them on the web. But Chauncey is a lot harder to find, honestly, which I do not understand, so if you're interested in him specifically, look him up by name. So I feel like helping get the Tuskegee Airmen going was Truman's biggest impact as a senator. Not a presidential, senatorial historian, not a military historian, but from my perspective, that's what I'm seeing. He did a lot of other things while he was senator too, though. So another impact he had, also a military matter, in 1940 and 1941, he toured multiple military bases around U.S., and he found that the money being used to support these sites was being absolutely wasted. Sounds vaguely familiar, to be honest. He proposed the creation of a committee to look into the issue. This became the Senator Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program. And honestly, its nickname was the Truman Committee. This committee gave him so much national press, good national press, that in 1944, he was chosen to run alongside FDR during his fourth and final presidential campaign over FDR's previous VP, Henry Wallace, who had served as his vice president during the start of World War II. Apologies. Now remember, as I discussed in topic 1 of this series, we used to vote for the vice president during presidential conventions. It was a completely separate selection process. The president did not choose their running mate alone like they do today. Other possible VPs this year were, as I said, Wallace, but also James Brynes, I think I'm saying this right, Brynes, from South Carolina. But the convention chooses Truman, FDR and Truman run together, and they are elected. So after election, FDR kept his supposed partner in the dark on basically everything he was doing. They didn't even meet, or maybe they only met like one time during the 80 days that he was president before his sudden and unexpected death. So on April 12th, 1945, less than 3 months post Post is after, prior is before. Post inauguration. Truman is suddenly president of a country at war, and he has very little knowledge of his predecessor's actions on certain topics, most especially the creation of the atomic bomb. And he has basically no experience as a member of the executive branch because, again, he's been VP for less than 3 months, and he's just been twiddling his thumbs the whole time. Nobody knew what kind of president he was going to turn out to be. A lot of folks were like, we're kind of doubtful. But that is the end for today's episode. It's a little bit of a short one. I didn't realize it was quite that short. I apologize. But his time as senator was actually just a couple of years. So, thank you for joining me as we explore this piece of Kansas City's history. I hope you tune in next month for part 4 of this story, which will cover his time after the presidency. If you are interested in Truman while he's president, I suggest you listen to my minisode on the Truman Library and Museum. I'm also going to discuss his time as president with Sadie Troy and Mark Adams from the Truman Library and Museum for my Patreons. That still needs to be rescheduled, but if you're interested, please become a Patreon supporter and you can get access to that episode. Sources for today. I pulled from Brian Burns' book, Harry S. Truman, His Life and Times, heavily once again. Also, Robert Farrell's Truman and Pendergast, which is pretty good. I've been enjoying that one. Also visited the National World War II Museum's website. They had a good article on the history of the airmen. And as I mentioned before, Chauncey is surprisingly hard to find stuff on, so if you want to read about him, I suggest visiting chaunceyspencer.wordpress.com, and I'm going to have that link on my website, which I know is out of date, as always, but it'll get there eventually. I hope you will consider becoming a financial supporter of the show if you are able. There are several ways you can do so. You can subscribe to patreon.com/homegrownkc or redcircle.com/homegrownkc. You can give a one-time donation at redcircle.com/homegrownkc or coffee.com/homegrownkc. That's ko-fi.com. You can give as little or as much as you want, even as little as $1 a month. You'll be charged the day that you sign up, and then on the 1st of every following month. If you become a patron supporter, you get 3 things. You get an item from the merchandise store valued at $5 or less. You get a shout out on every social media post and episode, so thank you Bjorn and Joan for your continued support. And lastly, you get access to exclusive bonus content featuring other local historians, archivists, and museum curators. Everyone who simply donates will receive a shout out on the next available episode, but you do not get access to that bonus content or anything from the merchandise store. Additionally, this is pretty cool to me. If you donate on coffee, 1% automatically goes to help fight climate change, which is something I'm very passionate about. And any donations I receive on coffee will be used exclusively to buy a new laptop, at least to start. This baby is 10 years old and she's really feeling it. You can also send me stars on Facebook. That is the final way in which you can support me monetarily. If you cannot, which is totally cool, I know we live in a rather sucky economy, you can still support me by following, liking, subscribing all my social medias. That's Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Tumblr, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm Homegrown KC on all of them. Also make sure to rate and review me on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen. Speaking of YouTube, real quick, I finally figured out how to get all of my episodes added to YouTube, so if you would rather listen to episodes on YouTube, they are all available, and I figured out how to make it an automatic update, so you'll never be behind. And if you all, shout out to everyone who already has liked and subscribed on YouTube. Love you guys. But if you will go ahead and like and subscribe me, even if you choose not to listen through YouTube, I would appreciate that. Because if I get up to so many subscribers, and it's like a few thousand, so I'm nowhere near that yet, but if I get up that high, then I can start monetizing, and I would like to do that. You can visit my website for additional information. That's homegrownkc.wordpress.com. You can also sign up for my newsletter on my website. That's the only place you can do so. Once a month, you'll get an email, or maybe once every couple of months if I keep forgetting. You'll get an email that says, here's what's new and upcoming. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or episode suggestions, you can email me at homegrownkc. Nope, not dot. Let's try that again. Ready? You can email me at homegrownkcpodcast@gmail.com. There we go. Or you can send me a DM on any of my socials. For merchandise, visit www.zazzle.store/ Nope. Wow, I am getting all kinds of tongue-tied. I'm so sorry. Let's try this one more time. Visit www.zazzle.com/store/homegrown_kc_store to see what's available. Again, that's zazzle.com. Thank you goes out to my talented sister-in-law, Sarah McCombs, for the creation of my logo, to the Dear Misses for the use of their song Kansas City as the intro and outro music of every episode, and to local libraries which enabled me to gather all my research. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Brittany, who reached out to me and told me that the audio from my Legacy of the Confederacy episodes was all mixed up, and that I had the same recording for parts 1 and 2. It's been like 2 years, y'all. Why has nobody reached out and said, hey, this is messed up? There's like 200 downloads for each episode, and y'all didn't say nothing. So, thank you for reaching out, Brittany. I had no idea, and I appreciate you letting me know. The audio has been corrected, so now you can listen to both segments. Alright, everyone, thank you for listening. Cheers.
Seem to shake this feeling, and I can't seem to get you off my mind. Thought I lost my